This is going to be a great day. I have heard our speaker speak before, and you're in for a treat. Our speaker's appearance was somewhat controversial because I had publicized that I had invited Bud Alley. And out of the woodwork comes a lot of his high school classmates, Clarence Clyde and Billy Wilkins and Joel Patterson and Archie Black and Seabrook March, and said, "That's not Bud, that's Buster. Don't let him tell you that he's Buster. That he's Bud, he's Buster." So I've given a lot of thought to what's the proper thing to do. And I have come to this realization. I could have these classmates of his walk out in protest, as I call him Bud, and the program would still go on. But if Bud walked out in protest, the program would not go on. So from now on, he is Bud Alley. One of Bud's many claims to fame, I want to just mention this before I get into his introduction, is he's the son of legendary Lyles Alley, a remarkably talented individual who gave 33 years to Furman University. And I don't know if there's another fellow who was talented enough to, at different times, to be the assistant football coach, the basketball coach, the baseball coach, and the athletic director. So he did it all. A remarkable man. And Bud is his son. I thought that to introduce Bud, I wouldn't use my own words. I'd use the words of our former speaker that spoke to us in November, Joe Galloway, who wrote the famous book that was made into the movie, We Were Soldiers Once and Young. He was with us in November to speak to us. This is what Joe Galloway wrote. "The battles of the Adrang in November of 1965 were horrific, with battalion casualties of 60 to 65% and nightmares enough to last all the survivors a lifetime. Second Lieutenant Bud Alley was in the thick of it at LZ Albany. The ghost of the green grass introduces the officers and men of the 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry, and then marches them straight into hell in the tall elephant grass. To read Alley's book is close to living the bloody battle itself." And that book is available for sale. In the back, it's The Ghost of the Green Grass, and I've got a copy of it, and I certainly would recommend it to you. That battle took place on 17 November 1965, and I'll read you just one sentence about the book. On 17 November 65, 350 of the 2nd of the 7th encountered over 1,100 North Vietnamese Army soldiers, and by the next dawn, 155 Americans lay dead on the battlefield, but they held their ground. It was the bloodiest single loss of life by Americans in the entire Vietnam War. And on the anniversary of that battle, when I had asked him to come and speak to us, on the very day of the battle's anniversary, Bud wrote me a letter to accept our invitation. And I just thought I'd wind up my introduction by reading a sentence of it that I found very moving. Bud said in the middle of his letter, this is written on November the 17th, 2015. "It is with a great sense of loss of these 155 who died that I recall the day, but also one of pride when I see what those who lived have given our nation. In spite of our individual struggles, we have made lives, paid taxes, raised children, and been the citizens our nation needed." What a fine introduction to a fine man.
Thank you.
I think it's
All right, sir.
There we go.
Thank you. Wow. Boy, I never thought I'd ever be home in Greenville, South Carolina, talking to a bunch of old friends and veterans. Thank you, Bob, for that generous introduction. It's so nice to come home and see so many friends here today. Today I'm going to talk about the single bloodiest day of the entire Vietnam War, the unpopular war, the one nobody wanted, the one nobody wanted to be there.
It happened in the Idrang Valley. And unlike the story of LZ X-Ray and Colonel Hal Moore, this is the second half of the Idrang battle. Moore and his battalion went into X-Ray on the 14th of November and fought for 3 days. Our battalion, the 2nd of the 7th, was sent in piecemeal to X-Ray. I arrived there on the 16th as the fight wound down, and Moore and his battalion were extracted back to Camp Holloway, 30 miles away. They had fought a hell of a battle. They were well trained, well led, well disciplined. They were the finest the Cav had to offer at that time. But my story began on LZ X-Ray on the morning of the 17th of November, 1965. But wait a minute, here I'm getting a little bit ahead of my story here. So let's go back and get a proper start to the story. For me, that story began 51 years ago here in Greenville, South Carolina. It was spring 1964. I had just turned 22. I was a senior at Furman University. I was living on campus with Gene Watson as my roommate that year. That particular spring day was just a typical day, flowers blooming, birds singing. Clear morning as I stumbled to that 8 o'clock class. I was probably thinking about the softball game that we had scheduled that afternoon, when finally I bumped into a fellow ROTC student who said, "Allie, the colonel wants to see you right after your class in his office." I wondered if they were going to bounce me out of the program for missing too many classes, or worse, tell me I was unfit to be an officer and was going to be drafted as soon as I graduated in June. Oh well. So I went on over, kind of timidly, knocked on the door of Colonel Riley Jackson. "Come on in, Cadet Alley." "Hold on just a second. Captain Carn, can you come in for a moment?" "Alley, have a seat." I'm sitting there kind of nervous. Colonel says, "We have an interesting proposition for you, son. The Army has just come out with a brand new program called the U2 program. It's designated for selected cadets that we feel can meet the challenge. The captain and I have looked over the records and feel that you're the ideal candidate for this program. It means that you will go straight to active duty within 90 days of graduation. You won't have to wait those 2 or 3 years to get called up. And because of this program, you will not go to any basic officers courses. Son, you will be a lieutenant in the infantry, a platoon leader, taking over as soon as you enter active duty. None of that namby-pamby repeat stuff for you. Hell, you'll be way ahead of your contemporaries." Well, it never dawned on me that night that might have been a backhanded honor, or that 51 years later, it would still be a pivotal point in my life. But there it was, and here I am today. And that's the start of the story, of a life-changing story that I'm going to tell you today. In 1964 and early 1965 at Fort Benning, Georgia, a place called Vietnam was one of those exotic places you'd never heard of. But every now and then it would come up, and you knew that you never would get there. You were going to do your tour and get out. That place called Vietnam had some things happening that you didn't know about. Since the French had surrendered in 1954 and made peace, the country had been divided into two nations. One in the north under the communist Viet Minh, and the other under a Buddhist agrarian society under an Emperor Bao Dai. But unbeknownst to me at the time, our CIA, under Colonel Edward Lansdale, had been at work down there in that southern nation, and he had handpicked a Catholic president by name of Diem. And he had a problem. He had a religious problem. He was president of a bunch of Buddhist farmers who just wanted to be left alone. So Colonel Lansdale arranged for the United States to move over 1 million Catholics from the north all the way down to the southern nation called South Vietnam. So now Diem had someone to rule, but the problems just didn't die down. And finally, the U.S. just got tired of dealing with him, and there was a coup by the military. First, there was General Minh, That lasted about 6 months. Then there was another coup, led to General Tan. And then there was eventually another coup where General Key took over in 1965. The North Vietnamese felt this was the opportunity to move into the South militarily and reunite that nation. And they poured into the center of South Vietnam, threatening to cut the nation in half, from Pleiku near the Cambodian border along the Highway 19 to Quy Nhon on the sea. The U.S. saw this materializing and needed a response quickly by late spring 1965. And they chose to take a concept that had been under some testing and make it into a real fighting unit. They were going to put boots on the ground like never before, in spite of the Air Force arguing that bombs were the answer. And on 1 July 1965, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara ordered the Army to establish a new entity, a full division, 18,000 men strong, with its own helicopters, and be ready to move in 30 days. It would be called the First Cavalry Division, Air Mobile. And the fighting units would be called cavalrymen, not infantry soldiers, a pride sort of thing. They would get to the battlefield by air, where vehicles could not go. So to say the month of July 1965 was bad and confusing is an understatement. It was chaos, with men coming and going, new equipment arriving and being packed, doing all sorts of hurry-up training. But on July 29th, we got the orders. Lyndon Johnson said, "I today have ordered the First Air Cavalry Division to Vietnam." So there it was. I was going to Vietnam to protect those poor farmers from those awful communists. Me. I felt like I was a soldier in that song. Please, Mr. Custer, I don't want to go. But it wasn't a choice. And what did happen, though, was that I got put into the 7th Cavalry, that same 7th Cavalry with its origins with General Custer. Irony. By mid-August, we were loading ships for a tropical cruise, courtesy of Uncle Sam. We went down through the Panama Canal, took a leisurely trip over through the Philippines, went through a typhoon, and a month later we arrived off the shore of Vietnam. It had taken 6 passenger ships, 11 cargo ships, 4 aircraft carriers. A month later, we were completing our move. They moved 18,000 soldiers, 3,100 vehicles, 470 aircraft, 19,000 tons of cargo to the waters off Quy Nhon Harbor, Vietnam. And we got there just in time for the fall monsoons in the highlands. And we were stationed up in the highlands, right dead center between Quy Nhon and Pleiku, right in the middle of where the North Vietnamese were trying to cut the country in half. Within another 40 days, we would be conducting offensive operations in that foreign country. Quite an accomplishment to go from 1 July to the middle of October and be 10,000 miles from home conducting offensive operations with new weapons, new technology, without much training. Now those operations were what we call search and destroy operations. We would normally take the helicopters into a clearing, put a company out on the ground, and leave them there. They would go out and search around the areas of that perimeter and see if they could find any enemy. If they did, we had another company sitting in helicopters, and immediately we would drop those helicopters right in on top of them and build up a support base for those guys. So, in theory, that's how it all worked. And you all know about theories and military. Our sister battalion, the 1st of the 7th, was the best trained and best led battalion in the division. Had handpicked leaders, well-trained soldiers. They had been test folks before it became the 1st Cavalry Division. They had been together for 3 years, training, developing these tactics and techniques. It was led by a man I admired then, and I've been fortunate enough to know well enough to call him a friend. At the time, he was a colonel, and he retired as a lieutenant general. And I want to share this message with you now. Assuming we can get this to work here. Excuse me, just a moment. Bob, could you type in Daisy 2007 on that?
You might want to change that after this.
Okay, all right. And while we're doing that, I'd like to take just a second to introduce a couple of people to you that are real important to me. One is my wife, who the book is dedicated to, Caroline. She waited on me that long year. We were engaged and got married 13 days after I returned. And another particularly important gentleman I'm delighted to have with us today is former Captain George Johnson, who was our adjutant that entire year. George, sitting in the back, if you'd stand, please, sir. Well, we're getting close. Now, if you'd hit play, Bob, up there. There we go. And now I think we'll be on the top here. There's no such thing as closure for soldiers who have survived a war. They have an obligation, a sacred duty to remember those who fell in battle beside them all the days of their lives and bear witness to the insanity that is war. Lieutenant General Hal Moore. So, by late October, the enemy had surrounded a special forces camp near the Cambodian border. It was outside Pleiku City, about 20 miles out. And that triggered the start of the first biggest engagement of the 1st Cavalry. Our 1st Brigade was sent in to relieve it. Well, technology. I think we're on the very back one, Bob. Let me just run it up right quick. Okay, thank you, sir. So here we are. This is the Tuco area of Vietnam. You can see over here the Port Quinh Nhan, where our goods came in and we came in. And we went up through a mountain pass to the place called An Khê. And it was just a flat jungle area that we cleared by hand. And it was hell. In the middle of that rainstorm coming in every day. Your boots, you had Army boots from stateside, and they were slick and you couldn't walk. Get stuck in the mud, trench foot going on, insects all around us. And we were in the process of trying to get out of those little pup tents into big tents and get settled. And then all of a sudden, appears Pleiku. Now the distance between Pleiku and An Khê is 60 miles. The distance between An Khê and Quinh Nhan is 60 miles. And this is not something that was done in World War II or in Korea, where you had these huge miles, where you had units moving and being separated by such. So An Khê was our division base headquarters. That's where the 18,000 started. That's what was our home. We lived there. This operation, this Special Forces camp, was over here. Little Special Forces camp sitting out by itself. Basically, they were the targets. They were supposed to be intelligence gatherers. And here's this guy getting ready to go. Now, after they had sent the 1st Brigade out, it went to this Special Forces camp right here, relieved and fought and did a little action. But there was enough action there that after 3 weeks of this, they decided to pull them back and send this new bunch, the 3rd Brigade, the 1st of the 7th and the 2nd of the 7th. They gave us one more battalion, the 2nd of the 5th. So we had 3 when we began our search and destroy operations. Now, just before we got into action, our unit had some major shakeups. All of a sudden, the guys that came over and took us over to Vietnam, they disappeared on us. So all of a sudden, we have a brand new battalion commander, Colonel Bob Dade, a brand new executive officer who had been the general's aide for a while, Frank Henry. We had a brand new intelligence officer who'd never been an intelligence officer before. We had a brand new operations officer who had been down in the Delta, not in the Highlands, as a MACV advisor. He came in as our operations officer. And we had a brand new company commander, Skip Fessmeyer. Skip just got in country, and he didn't even join us till we got to LZ Atlanta, as you'll see later, before we got into this. And we had a lot of missing and reassigned guys. Key people, Don Cornett, Bill McClure, Jim Kelly, Jack Hibbert. They were either out sick or had been reassigned or gone home. Time was up. So we lost a lot of this institutional memory to help these leaders when they took over. So on 12th of November, the leaders, the line companies, had gathered together, flown up to play coup. They left me, second lieutenant, to bring the cooks and the bottle washers up through this 60-mile pass called the Main Yang Pass, which was where in 1954 in June, the Viet Minh had annihilated 8,000 French soldiers in that pass. But here we go, second lieutenant. We got a couple of deuce and a halves. We don't know what we're doing, so off we go. We drive up that road. Fortunately, nothing happened to us. There's a Special Forces camp. Now, our brigade headquarters, the unit ahead of us, had gone ahead and established their quarters out at the Catecta tea plantation. This was an old French tea plantation. And there's somewhere out there, somewhere right along this road here, is brigade headquarters. They're about 20 miles outside of Pleiku City. Now, here's this map. As we begin to go into this thing, I get up there to brigade headquarters and they say, okay, here's the plan. We got 3 areas of operation. This is a big, Pleiku itself is 15,000 square miles. A lot of enemy, a lot of room for enemy out there. So they decided they'd give us 3 areas of operation. They had Columbus, they had the Bronze, which is where Columbus was centered. They had the Maroon, where Atlanta was centered, and they had X-ray. And those were the 3 areas that they assigned to individually to each of our battalions. Our battalion was to go into LZ Atlanta in the Maroon area. As you can see here, these areas are not contiguous, or not tangential. So the maps for one area don't match up with the maps of the other area. Just something that would come back to bite us a little later. But General Moore started his, don't know what happened to us there. Can we get, okay, thank you. General Moore started his operation down here in Lyme at a place called Landing Zone Yankee, and he was there on the 12th and the 13th. They were gathering some radio intelligence. And finally, he decided on the morning of the 14th, the place to go was LZ X-ray. 30 minutes after he set foot on the ground there at LZ X-ray, which was a huge landing zone. It was about 700 yards all the way around, diameter-wise. He got his soldiers in. 30 minutes later, they came under a fierce attack by 3 different North Vietnamese regiments. Now, these weren't these guerrilla guys you'd heard about wearing pajamas and farming during the day. These were the guys that beat the French. They'd walk 600 miles down from Hanoi to fight us guys. They were well trained, well disciplined. They were tough nuts. They were well equipped. So Moore gets in here and steps in the hornet's nest. All of a sudden, they start calling, all right, 1st to the 7th, send your B company in there as reinforcements. So on the 14th afternoon, our B company gets in to reinforce them. The morning of the 15th, here comes our A company in to reinforce them. We tried to get in there with Charlie Company and our headquarters group on the afternoon of the 15th and were unable to walk in. We couldn't get across a river. So finally we had to log her outside. In the morning of the 16th, we walked in with Charlie Company and the headquarters elements of our battalion. We got there not knowing what to expect, other than that there was a hell of a battle going on. As we got there, they were napalming the far side of the perimeter. The last attack was going on at that time. As the day wound on, they got another battalion in there. The 2nd and the 5th came in by air. So now we have 2 battalions on there. And oh, by the way, we're going to take Colonel Moore and his guys have been fighting for 3 days. We'll take them off the battlefield and take them back 30 miles to Camp Holloway. Let them get some rest and recreation. So now we got 2 battalions on the landing zone at LZ X-ray on the morning of the 16th, afternoon of the 16th. We hadn't slept, pardon me, we hadn't slept during those times. And all of a sudden, pardon me, that night of the 16th, we're sitting there in foxholes, hand grenades sitting on the tops of the foxholes, just waiting for the attack. It never came. We didn't sleep that night either. So here we are on the morning of the 17th. It's hot. Things are going along. We're moving and we're packing up old equipment and stuff, thinking we'll be, flying it all out in a little bit. But all of a sudden, 9 o'clock, radio message comes in. I happen to be a communications officer, and I'm sitting there with the radio. I'm in the foxhole. Right beside me is the colonel and the executive officer. And the message was this. Hey guys, there's going to be a B-52 strike come in exactly where you are. It's going to be there in 3 hours. You better get your stuff together and get out of there real quick. Well, aren't you going to send the helicopters for us? Oh, no, you're infantry guys now. You're going to get to walk out. So what was the situation? Well, the temperature was near 100 degrees. We had had no sleep for 3 days, 72 hours, some of us even longer. The enemy situation, hey, where'd all the Indians go? Oh, they left. They went back to Cambodia. There's not any of them out there at all to bother you guys. Just hurry up, grab your stuff, and get. What about all these excess men we got out there from headquarters company? They're not support. They're support people. They're not fighters. I'll just tell them to gather up all the excess stuff there and hurry up and get on the march. So with that, we set up a line of march. Recon would lead the way. Company A was going to follow with their 2 platoons. Next was going to be Delta Company with 2 platoons and no platoon leaders. Next was going to be Charlie Company with their brand new company commander, Skip Fessmeyer. And he had 4 platoons. And on his 4 platoons, he had 4 lieutenants. So he had platoon leaders there. So they're going to be following these other guys. But wait a minute, let's change this. Let's do a column of 2s so we can move faster. So let's set 2 platoons over here from Charlie Company and 2 platoons over here and put them 100 yards apart. And we're in the middle of the jungle and we've never seen this terrain or where we're going. So what we're going to do about this headquarters gaggle we got out here? Well, let's put half of them over on the west side and we'll put all the captains over there. Captain Schuchart, Captain Boone, Captain Knopf, Captain McCarn, and some of the sergeants. And the other half, let's see, we'll put them over on this east side with a couple of lieutenants. Lieutenant Alley, that untrained 2nd lieutenant, and another lieutenant, medical service guy named John Howard. By the way, he was direct commission. He'd never had any training either. So here we go. Getting ready to head out. Now, stop just a second, and I said, Dan Boone, sir, you're our captain. What's going to happen with us if we hit some? Oh, there's nothing out there. But if they do, Charlie Company, those 4 platoons in front, they'll stop and fall back and form a perimeter around you, and you just move into them, and they'll take care of you. Okay, sounds good. Now we got this other company called A Company of the 1st or the 5th had been attached to us that morning. We didn't know who the hell they were. They didn't know who the hell we were. But they were going to be part of this march. Told them just tag along behind us case anything happens. Come on up and help us out. And off we went. Myself, I was carrying an extra 292 antenna weighing about 45 pounds. And it wasn't in a backpack. It was in a canvas suitcase, more or less. And the move seemed endless. Along the way, I was summoned to check out a downed A-1E aircraft. Went over there, looked at it. There was nothing left. It had been stripped clean. So I went back, got back in line. The going was hard. We slogged through patches of elephant grass, way over your head. Then you'd hit broom straw. And in places you'd hit triple canopy jungle, blocking out the sunlight. Just follow the man in front of you and keep an eye on him too, because there were no maps. And we moved like cars on a Monday morning rush to the office. Start, stop, start, stop. Are we there yet? Nah, I don't know. Just keep moving. Imagine, if you will, that guy up front, the recon platoon leader. He's brand new recon platoon leader. He just came in right before we left. And now he's moving through this jungle he's never seen before, and he's having to take his compass and shoot azimuths about every 40 yards. That's about as far as he can see through the jungle. So he's having to stop and start, shoot his azimuth, walk that 40 yards, and shoot another azimuth, trying to keep direction. Headed for this spot on the ground called Landing Zone Albany. But before we got to Landing Zone Albany, before we get to Landing Zone Albany, which is this star up here, we're going, and this is X-ray down here, we're going to follow this 2nd of the 5th over to this landing zone. This landing zone is called Landing Zone Columbus. And we don't know why we're going there, but we're just going to follow them. Then when they get there, we're going to turn around and go this way. So we've still got 3 hours that we're trying to hurry up and make this move, because we got to be up here, way up in here, to get out of the way of those B-52s that are getting ready to bomb the heck out of everything. So we're moving along. We finally get to LZ Columbus and start turning up this way towards LZ Albany. We're banging and clanging. We got no noise discipline. We got no flank security. We had no communication with those guys up front. And suddenly Alpha Company, number 2 in line on this thing, stumbles across an old hooch, and it's got rice out there. And before anybody can do anything, one of those young privates gets his Zippo out and sets fire to it. So just in case nobody knew where we were in the jungle, here we're sending smoke signals up for them to find us. Now, we continue moving again, pack it up, move it, and all of a sudden, our recon platoon leader, Pat Payne, steps on a soldier. This guy just steps on him. Right quickly, his platoon sergeant saw another one, and he jumps on him. What they didn't know was that there was 3 more that got away that went back to alert the folks. So we capture these 2, and what happens? Our colonel, brand new colonel, never been out with an infantry group before, says, "Stop, everybody, where you are." And we're strung out about 600 yards through the jungle. We can't see him, he can't see us. And oh, by the way, over here on this side, there's another half of the unit over on our western side as we get there. Now, the colonel wants to get up there and interrogate these guys. So while we're all sitting back there, we figure we must be there close. So we drop our packs. We're smoking cigarettes. We're telling stories. If you got any food, some of the guys are eating lunch. And the colonel, as he's walking up, looks through this area right here and says, "Oh, that might be the LZ. That must be where we're going." So let's go ahead. Major Henry, you're the XO. You follow me up, and we'll go find this LZ, make sure we're there. And he get there, and he can't decide. There's 2 parts to the landing zone. There's a small part over here to the right, small part over to the left. Neither one particularly large. McDade, the colonel, had never seen a landing zone before, so he doesn't know. So wait a minute, let's just call the company commanders up here with us. So here we are, strung out, having lunch, just trying to get by. And he calls the company commanders all forward up to his post, and they move on up into a copse of trees. And just about the time they get up to the tops of the trees, recon decides they better go across this open field. And they move out across this open field. And all of a sudden, whoomp, whoomp. You can hear the sound of mortars going off on the other side of this open field. Bam, bam. They land right in the middle of the open field. Suddenly, automatic weapons fire opens up on the recon platoon. Wham. And they fall back into this copse of trees. And now what we've got going on is the worst situation you could ever imagine for the 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry, the untrained bunch. We're missing lieutenants, our company commanders, our battalion commanders, all the leadership and all the radios are up forward, and they're cut off, instantly cut off. Immediately, it was disaster. The firing ran from one end of the column all the way back. This is this little place called Landing Zone, Albany, right in here that we were going. Where we were was somewhere back out in here. The LZ was not directly to our front, where I was back there in the back. It was to the west and towards the front. Back where I was, I immediately pushed my men into the middle of Charlie Company. It was supposed to be stopping to form a perimeter for us, but no. Charlie Company was getting on line. They were supposed to make some kind of attack. So there we are, helpless. And the firing moved back down the line on top of us. And finally it got on top of us. We had hit the 1st Battalion, 33rd Regiment of the North Vietnamese. They'd gotten into position directly on top of us. They had sliced and diced us. They were in the trees, they were in the grass. You couldn't find them. They were moving all over. We were moving all over, and the firing was coming from everywhere. They cut A Company, the guy behind us that was supposed to help us out. He's cut off. So here we are in the killing zone. Charlie Company and the gaggle of Headquarters Company with no leaders, no communication, and we don't know where the hell we're supposed to be. For the next 4 or 5 hours, I scrambled around in that killing zone trying to find a way out. No avail. We didn't know who was to our front, so you had to be careful about shooting to your front. You had to be careful to shoot to your right or left. And then we had untrained men, scared to death, and they had automatic weapons, our guys, and they're shooting at anything that moves and anything they think that moves. It was hell. Every time I'd get a few men together, a mortar or grenade would hit us. I don't know how I lived through it, just one of those miracle things. And finally, after 4.5 hours, as darkness fell back in the killing zone in the triple canopy of the jungles, we could hear the enemy walking around, stepping on our wounded. As they wandered around, you'd hear this, "Oh, no, no, no," bang. It annihilated one of our guys. That whole area was just one big cauldron of killing. Finally, a lieutenant, Lieutenant Butch All, the last lieutenant living of Charlie Company, finally came down to me. And by then I was pinned down, and I had about 6 or 7 men around me, and we were pinned down with a machine gun. And Butch slid into me, and I grabbed him, and we were laying there talking while the firing was going on overhead. And all of a sudden, an A-1E, one of our prop-driven planes, came overhead. And what was he doing? He opens up his 20-millimeter cannons right where we are. And so we're now getting shot at by our own guys from all over, including the air. And he dropped some napalm out there about maybe 100 yards away, and that stuff is nasty. So we're sitting here not knowing what to do. All says, "I got an idea where we should go. Follow me." So we formulated a plan, kicked off, and Butch slides off into the tall grass. All of a sudden, I never hear from Butch again. Butch was killed instantly. I followed, and the men that were with me melted away just like a covey of quail. And there I was alone again. I'm getting shot at from every direction. We got napalm on one side. We got air guys shooting at us from the sky. We got enemy up in the trees. I'd shot a couple of them out in the trees. I never saw them. I just fired up in the trees, and all of a sudden something fell out of the trees. I stumbled along, and I fell into a ditch. It was a dry creek bed, and I nearly fell right on top of 5 wounded soldiers. They were all wounded, had no medicines, no water, no bullets. I surveyed the situation quickly, and about that time I hear this boom, boom, boom from way off in the distance. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's that? And then, shoo, shoo, go wham, go wham. Now we got the artillery firing at us, landing on top of us, right where we are, because our headquarters people way up front didn't know where the hell anybody was, and they were cut off, and they were trying to do the best they could to defend themselves. So there we are in the ditch, 5 wounded guys. We can't stay there, it's sure death. The men begged me to save them. They were mobile. One guy had his eyeball hanging out from under his bandage, telling me, I can see, sir, I can see. Another guy shot in the arm, another one shot in both legs, another one shot in the chest. I didn't know what to do first aid with them. I just did the best I could. I didn't have anything but a shirt to take off and give to them. So I asked them if they could move, and they said yes. And I said, all right, guys, we're going to say a prayer. And I said the Lord's Prayer, and decided the best chance we had was to try to find that artillery firing from a couple of miles away. So here it is, almost inky dark, not quite. We climb up, we go through that little ditch about 100 yards, and finally we hit a thicket of briars, just thick as can be. And I was at the point, and I stuck my head through there, and I saw something. I thought I saw something. So I stuck my head a little further, and I did. It was a shiny piece of a gum wrapper, and right beside it was a tiny human turd. And I closed my eyes, waiting to feel the bullet hit me. It never came. I froze. Finally, when it never came, decided we had it made. We were going up behind them. We're like a linebacker. We'd gone by a runner. We'd gone behind. They'd overrun us. So we crawled up through that jungle all night, guiding only on the sounds of the artillery that we could hear firing. And it took us a while, and we finally got there. It was pitch black dark, way too dark to try to get in. I got our men behind the little berm, and we lay down, and I hit my knees, and I threw up. I gagged. I'd never been so scared. I'd never been so thirsty in my life. And that's when I learned a truism. Fear tastes like copper, because that was the only taste I had in my mouth at that time. It was too dangerous to go in. It was dark, darker than the bottle of the inside of an ink well. So we hunkered down behind that berm, and I held the men's heads in my lap so that we didn't lose contact with each other. It was so dark. And we listened all night, silently praying that we would not get stepped on or attacked by an animal. Finally, dawn broke, and leaving them hidden, I went around the perimeter and crawled up to it to where I could call out, and got an officer to the perimeter, asked him to hold the fire. I had to go back and get my men, and we did. And we got in. My microphone.
Well, something just happened to it, didn't it?
That's okay. I hope you can hear me back there. I'll just try to be a little louder. We got in. We got into that perimeter. They gave us a couple of shots of something, put us on helicopters, and flew us all the way back to Camp Holloway. We were back at Camp Holloway. The medics grabbed us, cleaned us up, tended to us a bit, and I said, I've got to go to brigade to report. And I did. I got out and reported to brigade, tried to tell them what the situation was, and then they seemed not interested, so I got back on a helicopter and flew back to George Johnson, back to back at Camp Holloway. George gave us some new clothes to wear, sent us up to take a shower, and I slept for 24 hours. I couldn't get a ride back out to our battalion. Finally, the next day I did. I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you to what was happening the morning of the 18th. This is a collage of pictures taken by our forward air controller with a little tiny spy camera he had. The first one up there is the men as they're wandering around. The man to the right was Major Frank Henry, and he was the hero that got aircraft into LZ Albany at midnight and got some of the wounded out. Down here in the lower left is Captain Bill Schuchart, who is our battalion surgeon, talking to one of the other officers. Captain Schuchart retired recently as chief of neurosurgery at Tufts University in Boston. Here he was to the right of us. Now here we are with Colonel Bob McDade. He's talking to Lieutenant Mike Calla, the intelligence officer, and they're trying to figure out what in the hell had happened to them. Uh-oh. Nobody knew. And here we are back at Holloway, finally on the 21st, 3 days after we've been out there in the jungle. They decide to bring us back in. So we come back in to Camp Holloway, and George was standing there handing out water and beer at the time. Thanks, sir. And to my right is Lieutenant John Howard, and me in the middle, and Captain Dan Boone, our company commander. We're just smiling and happy to be alive. Now, I'm going to read you something here. Sergeant Fred Jenkins, Frogmore, South Carolina. Platoon Sergeant Melvin Gunner, Vincent, Alabama. Spec 4 Gerald Kosakowski, Lincoln Park, Michigan. Spec 4 David Mendoza, Cleveland, Ohio. Spec 4 Kenneth Bowling, Auburn, Pennsylvania. Spec 4 Donald Peterson, Chicago, Illinois. Spec 4 Charlie Anders, Leckie, West Virginia. PFC Charles Collins, Holly Springs, North Carolina. PFC Charles Moore, Columbus, Ohio. PFC William Pleasant, Jersey City, New Jersey. Spec 4 Elwood Davis, Salineville, Ohio. Spec 4 Alpha Jackson, Houston, Texas. Spec 4 James Holden, Millsboro, Delaware. Spec 4 Tommy Burlisle, London, Ohio. Captain Harold McCarn, Salisbury, North Carolina. Platoon Sergeant Charles Story, Birmingham, Alabama. Master Sergeant Charles Bass, Winterset, Iowa. And finally, Spec 4 Garrett Lee, Chicago, Illinois. There's no such thing as closures for soldiers who have survived the war. They have an obligation, a sacred duty to remember those who fell in battle beside them all the days of their lives, and to bear witness to that insanity that is war. Thank you.
Nothing I can add to that. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for doing your duty. Thank you on behalf of those who are alive today because you did your duty to the best of your abilities. We thank you for being here. God bless you. Thank you very much.